Good evening. Welcome to Laugh and Monkey Music Show. Tonight we have on Staehely. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure. You have a new old album
That's a
out,
good way to describe it. Yeah.
right? We'll talk about that in a minute. Just so people don't know, I want to introduce you to my audience that may have not have heard or too much about you. I know you were in Spirit for a little bit, and you
Yeah.
do like one of their better known critics love it the best. But you didn't do the single, but you sing the single. You've got the most known voice, even though you were there in the shortest time. Am I right on? Am I kind of right on
Well,
this one?
yeah. I mean, I don't know the exact fractions of time we're discussing, but I can. Yeah. Let me give you a little background.
Please do, because
Yeah, I grew up in Austin, Texas, before it was so famous as it is now, like a third generation Austinite. Uh, Went to Austin High, played in bands while I was in high school. Went to the University of Texas as an undergraduate, played in a band there. Went to law school at the University of Texas. Couldn't hang out and just be a musician because Vietnam was going on at that time. Had to stay in school, and so ultimately played in bands through law school, which was, I think I was the only law student at that time that had a band going. Uh, and but then I promised myself when I got out of law school I was going to give the music a full-time shot. I was only 24 years old at that point, looked about 19, and figured nobody's going to trust me to be their lawyer. And plus, if I didn't give it a shot, I might end up being one of those midlife crisis guys who starts a real bad band when he's 45 and embarrasses himself. So I went to LA. My drummer, the last drummer I had in Texas, Curly Smith, had gone out about 6 months before me, and had joined up with Mark Andes and Jay Ferguson, were in the process of leaving Spirit to start JoJo Gunn. And so when I got out there, they introduced me to the remaining members of Spirit, Randy California, Ed Cassidy, and John Locke. And so they had me over and rehearsed for 2 or 3 weeks, and they decided to invite me in the band. And so besides the songs I already had, I started working, getting up in the morning. I was renting a little one-room efficiency and about a block from Venice Beach, and get up in the morning, take a run on the beach, come back, start writing songs, and go to rehearsal in the afternoon. And that's the way it all started. And so that's
it's a good start. That's a good.
Yeah.
So I got a couple of quick questions. I appreciate. Thank you for that little bit, because I couldn't have gotten the timeline right. And then you left, but you did solo. And so, but when you're doing bands, your original goal was you're going to be a lawyer, right? That was your.
No.
Were you still on the fence? And you kind of.
As a matter of fact, as an undergraduate, I was pre-med, and
Oh my God.
yeah, and I was in a band with 2 law students, and we were a popular band in town, making good money on weekends at frat houses. And
Did you guys have a good name too, like with a med
Oh yeah.
student, 2 lawyers? You go.
Oh
Name?
no, but it had a name typical of the times.
Oh.
You know, the fabulous Chevelles.
Oh.
Of
I was
course.
thinking something like with a lawyer, like 2 lawyers and a med student, or some kind of like play on the
And
your majors.
that'd been too corny. Not that Fabulous Chevelles would. That was corny enough.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, you got me on that one.
In fact, however, I just noticed so recently there's some band in Australia called the Chevelles. So I guess maybe it's still a current name. At any rate, it was time for me to graduate, and it was going to be time for me to graduate, and I would have to leave Austin to go to med school. And these guys had one more year of law school left, and they already had wives and kids, and we were making good money. And they said, "Look, you're the lead singer, bass player. If you leave, you can't leave. You got to stay in town. You got to go to law school with us at least for a year until we graduate to keep the band together." So I actually started law school to keep the band together, and I couldn't hang out for a year because Vietnam was going on, and I get drafted.
Right.
But after the first year, I realized, you finish the first year of this, you might as well finish because that's the killer year. And realize I didn't really want to be a doctor anyway. It just seemed like a good thing to do, you know.
Well, it's amazing because you have a really good voice and it's still very strong to the day. And so like come out of the gate, like to be like thinking about doing other things and not be a musician because you're a good guitar player and a good songwriter, like right at the gate. So figured you just weren't going to put your head down and drill on through. I mean, you actually went to law school and actually did some lawing
Actually, I
later.
did. You know what? I got out of law school. I took the bar exam just to get it over with in case I ever wanted to
I
practice
think it's
law.
impressive. I actually like this part of the story. I think it's an interesting twist.
And so I was actually a licensed lawyer when I joined Spirit. I just never had practice. I never had used it and didn't for almost 10 years.
That's crazy. So after you left Spirit, you did some. Was it just well? Actually, so when you're writing songs, Spirit, was it your songwriting? Did it fit well with the band? Because you only did one album for a couple of years. You guys were together. Was it just
Uh,
not a gel, like musically?
no, actually it did gel. We were doing great. And the reason for the breakup really was that the two original members were kind of fighting with each other, or the John Locke decided he just gotten married, and I think he sort of
Life
wanted to
changes. Yeah, I
like,
was looking for
yeah.
really dirt. It just kind of wanted to have the songwriting because I'm always interested in songwriting, behind
And
the scenes type of deal.
and then so for a while we then Ed Cassidy, well, no, Ed Cassidy decided, I got it backwards. The drummer decided he was going to leave.
Hmm.
So for a moment in time, it was me and my brother and John Locke. And something really interesting happened that I regret I don't have on tape is Cozy Powell, who had been, if you're familiar with him, you know, had been the
Yep,
drummer for
ELP and
Death
every other
Group. And
legendary band.
yeah, my brother and I were big fans of his. And so here we were, and we were looking at the drummers, and we heard through the grapevine that Cozy Powell was in LA and that Johnny Winter was trying to talk him into joining his band. And I took a shot thinking, you know what, all the musicians stay at the Continental Hyatt House when they come to town. Let me call over there and see if
Right.
Cozy's there. So I called over there. He got on the phone, and I told him, you know, we're Spirit and lost our drummer, and would he like to come out and have a jam with us? At the time I was living at a house right on the beach in Trancas, which is kind of like North Malibu. Had a place on the cliff looking right out over the beach, had the roadies set up in the living room. Cozy comes over, and, you know, of course, we were real excited to play with him.
Yeah.
We played for about an hour or so, and he gets off his drums and he said, well, do I get the gig? He said, you want the gig? He said, yeah. I said, yeah, you got it. And so he said, well, I need to go back to England to do a Donovan album. I promised to Mickey Most, the producer, that I'd do that album, then I'll come back. So he did. He went and did that. He came back, and he was staying at my house, and we were going off to our rehearsal place rehearsing. We even went out and did a few gigs opening for the James Gang, and it was so struck. If you heard that, well, I guess you have heard the feedback album, as you talk, but if you can imagine
That's
those
good.
songs with Cozy Powell playing drums,
Power drums.
it just elevated those rock songs to another place. I mean, I love Ed Cassidy. He was a great drummer, great guy, but he was from the jazz beatnik
Hmm.
era with, you know, not a heavy beat, not a heavy foot. And Cozy, you know, was like one of the most
He,
powerful drummers I ever heard.
he brings
And
the thunder in that.
oh yeah, and in fact, they kicked us off the tour because we were blowing them away on those gigs. And
What were you guys called at that point?
well, we were still calling it Spirit at that point.
Oh,
And I
oh,
mean, and so then Cozy wanted said, "Can my girlfriend come over? She wants to come over and visit. Can she stay here at your place with us?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So she came over, and he was so funny because we'd be at rehearsal, have a great time, and it would, the minute we'd walk across the threshold back into my house, his whole demeanor would change. And I mean, and kind of not that happy. And she didn't like any woman that walked in the house. I mean, it's my house.
Oh,
She kind of freeze them out, you know, if it's my girlfriend or whoever. It was obvious she did not want him to be in an American band, fearing that she would be left behind.
no.
And so between that and some management issues we had, and Cozy also wanted Epic to, if he joined the band, to front him some cash that they didn't front him, and those things resulted in him leaving and going back to the UK. Also pressure from one of his buddies that I'm blanking out his name. I think it used to be in maybe a guitar player for Procol Harum, David something. Anyway, they started a group, did one album and didn't do anything and disbanded. And actually, one interesting thing is that right after that, Cozy called me from England, and what was the guitar player from Humble Pie? I think there were a couple.
Frampton?
Not Frampton, but the other guy.
Marriott? Steve Marriott?
No, he was. Anyway, he said, "Hey, what'd you think about this? What'd you think about starting a three-piece band? You on bass and me and I'll think of
Right.
it." I said, "Sounds interesting." He said, "Okay, I'll send you a ticket, come over to the UK." Well, right before I was supposed to leave, the guitar player broke his arm and had his arm in a cast, couldn't play. And then Cozy got another offer and did it. So that never happened. But one of my regrets to this day is that I have nothing on tape, not even a rehearsal tape.
Wow.
Cozy playing drums.
No one has a bootleg out there on the internet at this point that somebody recorded it?
Put the word out. If any of you, whereas this would have been in probably 73, I think.
73?
I think so. If any of your
Yeah.
followers know of any bootleg tape of Spirit with Cozy Powell on drums, I'd like
Contact me or contact Al directly, and I'll contact him. I want to hear that.
Anyway, that's probably enough subject.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean, well, Cozy actually did a lot of one-off, two-off albums. He never really stayed a long time in any band, so
But
that was par for the course.
Fact, yeah, you're right. In fact, one time he called me. He was in Houston. He was doing a gig with Brian May. I guess Brian May had his own album out or something.
He played Sabbath for an album too. I mean, he played with a lot of people.
So, yeah, he was always on the move, you know. And
he was.
So he called me. I went down and saw him at the Brian May show. And then the other thing, when I was Andy Johns was a friend and a client of mine when he was producing Cinderella. He was doing the second album for Cinderella. Apparently the drummer wasn't cutting it, and he brought Cozy over. And when Cozy found out that I was Andy's lawyer and friend, they called me, and we had a good catch up. Then the last time I ever saw Cozy was when he was playing in England with the original guitar player from Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green.
Yep.
And
wow,
saw one of those gigs, and we had a nice chat, and that's the last time I ever saw him before he died in his car crash.
Man, you've got some really good people. So how did then you took a break, right? Then you became a lawyer. You went back to.
Well, it's more complicated than that. It's
all right.
Well,
yeah, it's interesting because I mean, at this point you recorded, and this is a good part of the story where the album that we're going to promote, we're talking about, which is fantastic. When was that recorded? Around this time?
Okay, well, so when Spirit finally broke up,
right,
my brother and I did one album for Epic Records, which is the same label Spirit was on, as the Staehely brothers, but not, and it's really an interesting album, but you can only hear it on YouTube because it's not even out streaming. But if you go on YouTube, you can hear some tracks that fans have put up.
Yeah.
But because we no longer had the name Spirit, couldn't the same singer, same lead guitar player, same bass player they've been hearing for a few years. We found out the value of a trade name, and the booking agency couldn't get us a tour that would even break even, let alone make money. So we were kind of thinking, what do we do? Well, about that time, my brother got offered the job playing guitar with JoJo Gunn because Matt Andes left, and I couldn't ask him not to take it.
Right.
So he went with JoJo Gunn and toured with them and played on their last album. And so at that point, I just thought, you know what, getting all these bands, they break up. I'm going to try to see if I can get a solo deal. And I already had songs that were suitable, some songs that were suitable for solo artists as a solo artist, but made a conscious effort to write songs that were more solo artist friendly than writing for a rock band. And that's what you hear on this album.
Well, it feels artists, yes, it feels like the songs could have been perfectly between any song from the 70s. I mean, it feels so familiar, but new. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah,
man, it's like, it sounds great. I mean, it's really.
everybody says they're shocked at how great it sounds, because they assume because it's old, it should sound maybe not as technically good. But a lot of the stuff was done at some of the best studios in LA, the Record Plant, and various places with some of the best musicians.
Well, sometimes just music gets as a sound of that time period is dated, not actually because it's old. Certain producers put a stamp on a music and it's that sound. This has a very fresh, live, breathing sound to it. And that's kind of what it is.
You're not the only, I've been doing a bunch of interviews and I've had that said to me quite a few times. It sounds current. And I think, really? Because I'm certainly not the best judge of that because I know when it was done and when it was written.
Right.
But it's interesting to me that I'm getting a lot of feedback like that. And obviously I like it that you feel that way. But just to tell you how I got to doing these recordings is then, so when I decided to embark on a solo career and see if I could make it happen, I was pretty broke after having been in a band that headlined Carnegie Hall, and Dr. John was our opening act. And
wow,
I found myself doing talent night at the Troubadour, having 15 or 20 minutes to do some songs, and so it was really a moment where I had to say, okay, I've lived the fantasy part of being a rock and roller. I've heard myself on the radio, headline Carnegie Hall and big concerts, all that. Now, do I really want to get better at this and better at the craft of songwriting and stick it out through the tough times, or just go back and be a lawyer back to Texas? I said, no, I want to go for this thing. So what that began a very lean period at LA, but interesting and fertile. And it was really encouraging how many people were willing to help me out that believed in the music. So for example, some of those tracks like Wish I'd Said, Tenderhooks, a couple of the All Is Forgiven, a couple more I think were done on spec time that friends with studios and
really?
and musicians came down and played for free, including like Jim Horn, the most famous sax player. And he's the guy playing flute on that Live Like a River.
It is
And
flute. I figured it was flute or piccolo or some kind of wind instrument.
yeah,
You had everything on that album.
and the Blackberries, who were the most famous background singers, they'd sung on uh, the Feedback album and the Staehely Brother album. They came down for free and put background vocals on. But then some of the stuff was like Stand in Love, Safe Cracker, Too Long Alone, Coastin', Epic Records. Heard some of this spec demos I've done, and Greg Geller, who was the West Coast A&R, uh, gave me a budget to do some more. And John Boylan, who was just become a staff producer with him, wanted to produce them. So I said, okay. So we did those songs at the record plant. And then some of the other, then I finally got a solo deal. And got started the album with had Steve Cropper on guitar, Gary Malaber on drums, Pete Sears from Jefferson Starship on bass, Al Garth, Liza Messina, and later played with the Eagles for about 12 years, sax and violin, and Snuffy Walden, who was playing in my band around LA, who I could not be more proud of the way his life has turned out. I mean, he was balls to the wall, electric guitar god, and is a wonderful musician, but not the type of musician that you would think would end up being the king of TV music, which he is now. For those of you who don't know out there, I mean, you see West Wing, or you see Roseanne, or Ellen, or Wonder Year, all that stuff. See W.G. Snuffy Walden in the titles. That's Snuffy Walden, who's playing, by the way, playing the solo on the very first track, Wide Eyed and Innocent, off this album, and 2 tracks down on Chipping Away.
That's the song I like. That's my favorite on the track.
It's interesting you say that, because that's one of my favorite moments in this album is in the middle of that track when Snuffy started the first half of the solo, Al Garth comes in with the violin, and then they finish it off together. It's well,
I played that track a few times, like I've listened to the album going through or whatever. But I mean, they all stand out different ways, and some would be I could see different hits at different times. But like yeah, Chipping Away was the one that really just kind of like that's kind of I they should have been a single back. I don't know why it wasn't a huge single back then.
well, because it's never released.
I know. I'm saying that could have been that screams single.
That's the
Especially
thing with all of these. I mean, it's a very unusual project because it's what I think, and obviously you think are well-written songs from that era, played by some of
yeah.
the best guys from that era in some of the best studios, but never released. So it's not like, somebody pulling out some garage tapes that they did in their garage band.
No, exactly. I mean, it's jamming.
And there seems, and you've probably heard this too, in addition
Mhm.
to, the boomer crowd, there's seems to be some interest from younger generation in that 70s era music that they
Mhm.
find some of this stuff interesting.
So
But by the way, Chipping Away,
yeah.
since you do like that song, that was a song that really was written from a real life experience. The
Oh, was it?
Yeah, when we toured, well, the last tour we did with Spirit was in Australia, and I met a woman down there, and we fell in love, and she moved to LA. She was a journalist, and she moved to LA with me, but just shortly after she moved, uh, the group of magazines that she wrote for in Australia, the person that they had working for them out of New York died.
Mhm.
In fact, uh, you may know who I'm talking about if I could remember the name, but she wrote a book about rock and roll, or rock and roll director or something. But at any rate, they asked Julia, I said, well, would you go to New York, just take her place for a while till we found a replacement? And she ended up
Yeah.
having to stay there for about a year. So we were having a long distance romance, and they get hard to do, and so it
Yeah,
was
I'd say.
that Chipping Away was written kind of during that period.
Because I know, and I've seen you guys actually play it live. We have a current up video now. I'm still playing it. Sounds great. A little jazzier now.
To tell you the truth, I don't know if that video should be up. That's the first time we've performed that song with this band. I probably should have kept it
Sounds good.
really well. That's good to hear. But if it sounds jazzier, it's probably just because the people playing on it a little bit.
Well, I mean, I figured it would be different because the time period, different artists, whatever.
Right.
The original sounds rockier, but every artist over the years changes their songs a little bit because you change and it grows.
Yeah, but to tell you the truth, I like the way that was recorded. I didn't purposely change it. I think it's just we had several rehearsals and did it for the first time, and that's the one you heard. So it wasn't. I mean, if I could, I'd do it just like I like that track like you so much. I'd have it sound just like that every time I played it, and maybe more like that.
And your voice sounds great. It hasn't for somebody. So you took some time, and you as a lawyer. Obviously, were you still playing a little bit and singing, keeping your chops up? Because
here's what I was like is when I started doing the law thing. First, I came back to Houston, back to Texas, and came to Houston thinking I'd be there for 2 weeks. I was a friend of mine from LA was the song music supervisor for Urban Cowboy. They were shooting it down there in '71.
Mm-hmm.
So I was pitching some songs to her, and the aforementioned drummer in my band who went to law school by now was a criminal defense attorney in Houston, and I was staying at his house. And he said, "Did you ever pass the bar?" I said, "Yeah, I pay my dues every year. I never have practice." And he said, "Well, get you a suit." And he said, "Do you have a suit?" And I said, "No." He said, "Get a suit. I'll take you out of the courthouse, get some court-appointed cases for guys who can't afford lawyers." I said, "Well, I was pretty broke at that point. That record deal had just fallen through." And so I said, "Okay." So I go back, and Lyndon Johnson's brother, Sam Houston Johnson, who had been a friend of our family's, had died about 6 months before that. My father was executor of the will, and he gave me 3 of Lyndon Johnson's brother's suits to take back to you. So I trotted off down to the courthouse and one of those suits, and my buddy starts getting me felony cases only because he tells
the price is right.
I'm with him, I'm with their firm. And so
wow, that's lucky.
So
I mean, the fact you kept the license up too and paid it every year is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, because I had never used it, but I started, and I kept thinking, oh, this is kind of a lark. It's just temporary. And then I got a girlfriend, and then one thing led to another. And to tell you the truth, it was good medicine for a guy who just been record deal fall through, and been through all that stuff I was talking about. To all of a sudden be on the other side, being not looking for people to help me have a hit record, but for me to help people with more basic problems like don't let me go to jail. So it was kind of it came along at the right time, but I kept doing so for a while in Houston. Louis Messina, who had called Pace Concerts and now has the Messina Group. He's one of the biggest promoters in the U.S., but he started putting me on shows, opening for everybody from Jefferson Starship, Emmylou Harris, to Roy Orbison. I opened for Roy Orbison, which was pretty cool. And then I got chance to run off and do a tour of Europe with John Cipollina and Nick Ravenitis, the West Coast guys. And at the end of that tour, we did an album in Germany, came back, ended up doing a solo album. I made a deal that came out on Polydor in Europe. Did another tour of Europe with Cipollina and Ravenitis. In between, so for about my first 5 years in Houston, I was living this double life of lawyer by day, rock and roll musician.
Clearly, your friend let you work a nice schedule that allowed you to move it around a little bit, huh?
Yeah, well, actually, his law partner wanted me to. It was flattering. After a while, asked me if I wanted to join the firm, and I said, "Well, I really appreciate it, but I just want to stay loose because I want to have the flexibility to do musical things too." So I was really just on my own.
Yeah.
With the firm as it happened, and I've never been with the firm. So, so I was doing some. Then I started as a follow-up to the album released in Europe, an album in Houston with Andy Johns, as I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
He came down and we started an album, and I had Donnie Wynn on drums, who toured with Robert Palmer and recorded with Robert Palmer.
Oh, yeah.
And my brother played on some things, but let's see, Pat Thrall played most of the guitar, if you remember from Pat Travers and the Hughes Thrall Band. Later he played with Meatloaf, I know.
Yep.
Excellent guitar player. And actually, this keyboard player played on some stuff called Aaron Zigman, who's now a big movie composer. I remember him quite a different way. We were recording out at a ranch with a mobile truck, my friend's ranch, about 40, 50 miles outside of Houston, a town called Chapel Hill. And my memories of Aaron Zigman has been totally out of it, lying under a grand piano. But he did wonderful work. And so anyway,
You got to enjoy the arc of a lot of those careers.
yeah. And like I said, I'm particularly proud of Snuffy, all that he's done. And actually, we did an interview together about 2 weeks ago, because we did an interview with someone who liked to do interviews. He said, "Can you get someone else that was on the project to do it with you?" So I called Snuffy, and so we did an interview together, and it was a lot of fun. So we're still.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so, at any rate, finished the project with. About the time we finished the project with Andy, we thought we had a deal, and then we didn't have a deal, and my son was born, and finally I said, "Okay, I've been still doing a lot of interesting musical things, but I'm a family man now. I better concentrate on this law thing for a while." And so it turned out I'm getting around to finally answering your question. So there was about 20 years where I didn't really go out and perform while my son was, because we got divorced when he was 6, and he stayed with me. And his mom stayed involved, but she had alcohol problems, and so anyway, I was the primary custody, and so he stayed with me, and so for about 20 years. But in answer to your question about keeping up my chops, I was determined to not be one of those guys who later couldn't. I can't do it anymore. So I always played enough and sang for friends, and people come over to the house, and we have parties, and once in a while I'd sit in with people, and so I was kind of determined to, if I can't get any better, don't have time to get a lot better, at least don't want to get any worse. That's sort of.
Well, it's good. I mean, because you do. It's not like, consumers you take it out into a whole different career, and you're not actually out there. It's like they just took you and froze you. They froze you in that time level, that skill set, and you haven't changed, and they just kind of take you out to play, and they put you back up, and they,
My
you know,
brother thinks I sing better now than I used to, but be it as it may, it's lucky that I can still do it. But I also haven't had any
did your
experience doing
interest in did you start when you, because when you were dabbling back and forth, did you start checking out the contracts and stuff, like legally, because you have legal background, and also you start to do these projects, and there are legal things where you're like, hey, let me take a look at that, like.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. The deal I did with for the European with Polydor,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't hire a lawyer to do that. I did it.
They say about a person that represents
Yeah, I
themselves.
know. Yeah, I know. I know it. I know it well, and there's a lot of truth to that too. There's a lot of things that
No, I
just
get it. I'm saying,
reminded me. I'm way overdue to update my will.
but I was going with this, like, did that kind of draw you into the entertainment part of it by proxy, doing your own thing, kind of being like, hey, this is a thing?
Well, more than that, after the criminal law thing was, it's very seductive to tell you the truth, because it's always something new. It's and then the courthouse culture is funny. It's just that's any culture that has a lot of seriousness and pomp and circumstance. That's why there's so many lawyer shows. There's so
Mm.
many doctor shows. Because there's the serious part of all that. But if you're on the inside, it's also a lot of humor. You know how it is. Uh, and so, well, just to give example, one day I was walking out of the courthouse, and this guy stops me and says, "Hey, you want a case?" I said, "Yeah, okay. What next?" Well, I was coming out of the supermarket, and they caught me with 3 ducks and some vegetables. I said, 3 ducks and some vegetables. I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I always wanted to be a chef, and I like to cook." And I said, "Well, where are you from? You don't sound like you're from around." He said, "I'm from New York." And I said, "Where in New York?" He said, "Poughkeepsie." I said, "Well, I've been to Poughkeepsie." He said, "Oh, did you pick your toes in Poughkeepsie like the old show?" I said, "No, I picked my guitar in Poughkeepsie. I opened the show for Hot Tuna." And he said, "Wait a minute, about 3 years ago at the Civic Center?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I was at that concert." I mean, yeah, I said, "Okay, well, here's my card. Call me." So I ended up representing this guy. But my first music client of any note, I guess, was Stevie Ray Vaughan. And did his record deal with CBS and some this stuff. And that really happened because of his roadie, who had Cutter Brandenburg, who had been um, from Texas, but he went out to LA and was ready for JoJo Gunn, and knew him out there, and he was working with Stevie, and Stevie was about to lose contract. Said, "Man, you've got this lawyer, but he's not an entertainment lawyer. You need an entertainment lawyer." So anyway, so ultimately it took a while, but developed an entertainment practice, and haven't done any criminal law since I did my ex-wife's DWI some years ago.
I can imagine though that an artist would want another artist. They trust you more than anything. So it's almost feel like it'd be a no-brainer. Who's this lawyer? Well, there's this lawyer here, or there's this guy that actually has been in a band and has had a career and has lived the life you have. Do you want him to represent you, or somebody else that just doesn't even understand music?
That's true. I just take it for granted because it's been my life. But no, I've had a lot of clients who say, it's really appreciate the fact that you've done
And
all this, and you.
they know you as a kind of the person you were when you were a musician too. So it's not like you had a bad reputation, So you had a reputation of being a solid earth type of guy. So now you're just, it's like the path. It really just ties in really well with your journey.
Yeah, I guess so. Whatever it is, it's been an interesting, long and winding road to invoke the Beatles and their
That's right.
current Get Back stage here.
That's an awesome. It's great. Have you seen it? The
Yeah,
whole thing?
I finished actually my brother came over 3 nights in a row, and we watched it together. One night first,
All of them.
next night two, next night three. Yeah, so that was just last week.
I think it's great. It made me so happy to see John and Paul getting silly.
Yeah, you got
Like,
to see the real relationship, right?
because I mean, I don't know how many books I've read or how many, in my life that I have, but to see that and, it kind of cleared up a few things too, that it was,
Yeah,
better.
yeah. I mean, take the business out of it. You could see their process too. That was interesting to watch.
Oh, the songwriting process was awesome.
Yeah, because I mean, and also what you realize is they understood and took it for granted, unlike most groups. Now they're a vocal group. I mean, they played their instruments, but this minute one of them just started singing a song that they were even just wasn't fleshed out yet, the other would start singing with him, either as a trying out harmonies or uh,
Yeah, no,
all the
it's
response stuff, and knowing that we're not just going to have one lead singer, one guy singing the song all the way through. There's most likely we're trying to work stuff out like we always did.
the nucleus of that band though. Yeah, one saying it, one scatting back and forth. You saw Paul almost like write a song while he was just kind of playing around, waiting. You know, those four people together, you get people break up for other reasons, but man, the odds of that nucleus with so much talent that works so well together to just go so fast, like, the
Yeah.
wealth of material that could have come,
And you
quality.
probably read this. Yeah, he didn't say it, I think, in this, but I've seen other interviews with Paul where he said, blows my mind. He said, there was never a time when Paul and I mean, John and I got together to write a song that we didn't write a song.
Yeah,
And you think about that. I mean,
I know, that's
like,
amazing.
they would write a song, one of them would write a song, come in the early days, come in one day they'd be expected to show it to the band and make the record in maybe a 3-hour session. Now, of course, they weren't doing but it gives you a clue as to, because one of the first things I thought in this video movie was this stage of their career, post Sergeant Pepper, all the things.
Hmm.
Why would they take on the task that they've set for themselves? That's set in the we see in this movie, where okay, in 3 weeks we're going to write 14 songs, and then we're going to play them live to the world on TV and make a record. You think, really? Who can do
You,
that? And
you
why
think that
would you?
because of the pressure though, that they used to do that, and that kind of maybe the
That's what I
pressure is
mean.
what they set their own deadline because they realized that, and maybe because they're falling apart at the seams and they realized they needed a deadline, they needed a short window. They couldn't take a 6 month drag it out because, you know,
that that's exactly what I think. Is that well? It's such a it was so ingrained into them that that's how but we always work under pressure, and we've always done
right.
it that way. But that degree of pressure, it was unbelievable. But when you think about it, they always did at least 2 albums a year, plus singles that
Hmm.
were on the albums. And I think somebody mentioned that they actually did 3 albums, including Help, in one year. And, and that's the way I guess it was, especially for those English bands in those days. Because like Pete Brown, who wrote most of the lyrics for the Cream songs, uh, "Sunshine of Your Love," all
Hmm.
"Feel Free," all that stuff. Um, one time I asked him, I said, "How'd you end up getting to write lyrics with Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton for all these Cream songs?" He said, "Well, he said I was a poet, and known as a poet, and the poet scene and the jazz scene were very intertwined at that time in
Yeah.
early 60s, and uh, so I knew Jack because he was in a jazz outfit. And so when they with Cream, he said they would go out and do a tour, and when they just as they got home, they'd be told by management, the record company, okay, you got 2 weeks to do the next album. Well, they didn't have material. He said so. Jack would call me up and needed help. So, but that was the kind of schedule, I guess, not just the Beatles, but other
Back
acts like
then,
that were. You remember Elton John, even in the early 70s, was doing 2 albums a year, just one
the
clock.
real fertile years for him too.
Yeah,
That pressure that it just, it's probably good because a lot of good stuff came. If you took breaks, maybe all that good stuff wouldn't come out. It would have kind of fallen off, off the thing if you waited so long between. Maybe that's what part of the secret is to keep it, if you're going, and not do a second album that's good, because they didn't do a copy of an album. Just if your things are going good fertily, keep writing songs however you want, but don't stop the process, really.
Yeah. The other thing that blows my mind, I don't know if this is true, somebody told me that 3 weeks after finishing that Let It Be thing that everybody's going to see, they started the Abbey Road out. If that's, I mean, think about that. You saw what they went through in that.
They were hot though, right?
For a month, and they went and started writing new songs, making a new album. So
it's crazy. I think there's two things I took that really outside of it was, well, first off, the fact that Yoko Ono was doing the Yoko Ono thing,
right.
And but she was also Apollo's like playing drums, and the other guys, doing like really loud dissonant guitar sound. It's almost like an early grungy sound that I mean, it's like there's another sound they created early on. They're the first version that did that, alternative rock.
Right, you're right. Yeah, and notice how kind of pure. I mean, first of all, nobody's got a huge pedal board and dealing with looking for all sorts of. It was just plug into a Fender amp pretty much. I mean, George had it.
Yep, or a different guitar for a different tone. I mean, the other thing I thought was funny is when George did quit, and we'll just get Eric. Now, the fact that there's been such a back and forth between the two of them, and it was like that, I think there was a little more humor and a little bit just to get a little rub on George. Like either that would get him to come back, or if he didn't, I mean, it's Eric Clapton. If you're not going to have George, you have Eric Clapton. It's not going to suck.
No,
if you have to have replace, if you have to have somebody else,
yeah.
Well, right, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, but I think it was just to get a rub out of him and probably bring him back. Be like, fine, you're not going to.
Right.
I think that was pretty funny.
But the other thing that I'm sure you noticed too, everybody, is that Billy Preston, how he sparked them incredibly.
Yes.
When he came in, and who would have guessed? I wouldn't have guessed that all happened by accident, by happenstance. And it was actually George that got him to come. Because
I didn't know all that. I just knew Billy came in, and I knew he was a fresh energy. That's all I knew, like from reading, but not to that level. I think he's part of the part that re-sparked part of it, that lit the energy to lead to Abbey Road. I mean,
I think you're right, because, well, first of all, you could say they were already talking about needing a keyboard player, and they talked about, well, maybe Nick Hopkins, which, by the way, I had a chance to work with, and one of my favorites too. But then the way it all happened, if I understood that, is this the way you understood? Sometimes I couldn't understand what everybody was saying, but is that George, and I think it was while George was on his break, his quitting period, that he went to see Ray Charles and saw Billy Preston playing with Ray Charles and realized, hey, we used to know him in Hamburg when he was playing with Little Richard, and went back and found him, invited him down to the studio. And the minute he came in, they said, hey, oh, great, wow, look at the song we're working on. So get back, and right away he's doing just what the song needed.
He was so good. Billy Preston. He was so good on the album. He was in the show, and just in general, what a great musician. So it was a fantastic. It was good. I enjoyed it.
And also, Billy Preston was just the right thing and the right guy. But also, when four guys are in a room together, sometimes anybody walking in gives you somebody to perform for, or just kind of break.
Well, Yoko reading a newspaper was the part that was kind of soul crushing.
Yeah.
I'm not even making a dig at Yoko in general, but I mean, if you're a person, even back then, sitting in the room while the Beatles was writing a song, it's like.
Yeah, you know what? I was surprised at how comfortable the other guys seemed with it at that point.
Well, that's another thing, right? Because we learned it was over the years. It was like they were like whatever,
Yeah, because I mean, I can't even imagine any bands I've been in where somebody brings their significant other and she sits down right next to that guy, and that's the way we're going to record and rehearse. And I mean, it's unthinkable yet. Like I said, after everything we've heard, the other three guys seem nonplussed about it.
yeah, I think it threw a lot of the theories out the window and it really proved a lot, in a really good way. And it really supports how, like Paul said, there's a chance they, if it hadn't happened to John, they could have gotten back together again on some level.
I think
You
so
know,
too.
I wouldn't be surprised, and that really would just confirmed it. So what is the plan now back to you and your fantastic album you have out? So how to get unearthed and what are we doing now? COVID's kind of weird now. You got plans? Because I know you have a single, Feel the Heat too. So
Yes,
let's
yeah, here's the plan. So first of all, I've been thinking about getting this stuff out for a long time, and you know, 75 years old. If not now, when? You know? And but I never wanted to just kind of. It's easy to get stuff up on the internet. I just never wanted to do just a digital dump and just okay, here it's all up there now.
right.
Find it if you can, you know, if you care. I felt like it deserved a little something more than that, and so I contacted Ron Stone from Gold Mountain Management, who had been our manager in Spirit, and later went on to manage Nirvana and Bonnie Raitt, and Ricky Lee Jones, and Ray Davies, and all kinds of other people. And I said, Ron, I know that I need, if I'm going to put this stuff out there, I need some digital marketing help. Do you have anybody? He said, yeah, there's a guy, Jay Scavo, that used to be head of digital marketing for Warner's. And he's got a company now. That's who I put all my artists with. And he really does what he says. He's not like some of these digital marketers, you know. And
Well, you're also still a lawyer.
it's, we talked to him, and after a while decided, yeah, I'm going to do this. And so I called Ron back. So thanks for the recommendation. I'm going to use them, and I'm going to release this stuff. And he said, well, you know, I'm a manager, don't you? I said, well, yeah, but I didn't think you would want to be involved with this. Could easily be a money losing project.
Now
Said,
you make it
no.
sound like being a jazz musician, right?
Yeah. He said, no, I'll help you out. So he got involved, and then the digital marketing guys had a guy that contacted you from Earshot. Mike turned out to be great as a PR
Yeah.
guy. So all of a sudden, I have this team, and then Ron has this great woman that redid my website and does other. So all of a sudden, instead of just me dumping all this stuff out there, there's a team,
Yep.
and
How did you have rights to the music though? Like, does it, because sometimes artists don't have the rights, or did they turn them over
well,
to
these
you?
were all things that, I mean, some of it were, you know, the demos that Epic never, you know, ultimately they didn't. Maybe I didn't finish telling you what happened with that. When he finished the demos for Epic, maybe I did. I can't remember. Steve Popovich, before it was approved, left CBS to start his Cleveland International with Meatloaf as his first act. And so that Epic deal didn't happen. So they didn't want him. So I've got him. And then the other deal, the record company went out of business.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so
You know what I'm saying? You've heard the stories where like artists can't touch their stuff and it's the whole thing.
yeah, well, that probably would have been the case if this stuff had been released, you know. But for example, the Staehely Brothers album is owned by Epic. I'd love to have that out again, but I don't have the rights to that because that's never even been released on CD, which is unbelievable.
You could re-record it. Hint, hint.
You know, it wouldn't be the same. I agree.
It would. Well, no, because your voice is better. Your brother even says.
Yeah, but even
Yeah.
the players and some of the stuff that's on there is so cool, like the Blackberries. You know, they don't exist anymore. And uh, but anyway, we'll could maybe license it from Epic but anyway, well, back to your question with what's going on. So
Yeah.
this is volume one,
Mhm.
as it says, which implies volume two, which will be the Andy Johns, primarily the Andy Johns stuff that I mentioned. But in between, during the pandemic, it's out in West Texas. We have the Big Bend National Park area. We have a place out there, and we stayed the month of August 2020 out there. And I was thinking, I keep saying I got all these other songs I'm gonna record, and never do them. I've heard, not here for a month. I've heard there's one studio in Marfa, which is 40 minutes away. I know two great musicians there, Frank Christina, the drummer from the Fabulous Thunderbirds,
Mhm.
who had also been my client when he left the Fabulous Thunderbirds. Extricated himself.
I think everyone's been your client at one point.
And Scrappy Judd Newcomb, who's a great guitar player from Austin, who's relocated to Marfa. He played with Ian McLagan's bump band and played with all sorts of people in there in Austin. And called them up, and they said, "Yeah, the studio's okay here." And I said, "You guys, what do you think about doing an album?" I was just thinking, I just want to get these songs down.
Yeah.
I just sent them some guitar vocal demos, and then we had one rehearsal. And they said, "Well, Chris Marish, who great bass player I heard played with Scrappy, and he played with Eric Johnson for years and years, was coming into town." I said, "Well, ask Chris if he wants to play bass," because I didn't really want to play bass, because I wrote the songs on guitar and kind of wanted to present them that way.
Yeah.
And so we had one rehearsal, went in the studio, laid down 6 basic tracks in one day, these guys, and of course 4 days to overdub and everything. And they loved the songs. They said, "Look, man, come back with 5 or 6 more and you'll have an album." So that all happened like end of August, 1st September 2020. I went back in October and we did 6 more, 2 covers of friends of mine. One, you familiar with Phil Lee?
Sounds really familiar.
He's great character, but great songwriter. He's got this song called "Night in the Box" that I always love. And I've been doing it I'd already been doing it live. And I don't do hardly anybody's. I don't do covers usually, but this song is and then Freddie Kirch and Cam King, Freddie plays drums with me. I always love this song that they have called "What's So Hard About Love." So those are the only 2 covers. The rest are mine. And so, at any rate, sometime in the next 6 months, that's going to be the next album before the Volume 2 album. And we're hopeful that we may find a little label to help us put that out, either here or over in Europe. So, and then there's Volume 2. Something else is happening next year, which is that we're talking to Sony about, which is the 50th anniversary of this Feedback album, the Spirit Feedback.
Oh, wow.
So if the year after that will be the 50th anniversary of the Staehely brother. So there's it.
You got a lot of work ahead of you. You better be taking your vitamins and getting some sleep, because you got a lot of work ahead of you.
So I don't know if all these things are going to come to pass. A couple I'm not totally in control of yet, but for sure there's going to be the Marfa Sessions album come out. And then for sure there's going to be Volume 2. And if all goes well, there may be 50th anniversary vinyl release of
That'd be cool. That would be very cool.
So yeah, so that in addition to my law practice keeps me busy. Plus we're doing.
You're still doing law right now?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Well, I mean, you're 75. I figure you take some time to just like, I'm just gonna do music.
People say, "Well, when are you gonna retire?"
I'm not saying you have to retire, but I'm not the guy, because when you're tired, whatever. But I'm saying at this point, I figure you'd be like, you know what?
Well, you know what? I kind of have it. I don't have to do everything. I got a couple younger lawyers that worked with me for a long time, so I don't have to do every single task myself.
Yeah.
And so it seems manageable. It's busy but manageable. But still doing gigs, but mostly in the Texas area, Houston, Austin, just did a gig in Austin.
If it opens up, are you going to tour more besides just that
I'd love
Texas
to.
area?
And, also, I like doing acoustic as well as the band stuff. So in instances where it might not be viable to take a band, me and my brother, a lot of times we'll do acoustic shows too. In fact, a lot of times we'll do the whole evening, not have a opening act. We'll come out, do an acoustic set, followed by an electric set with the whole band.
That's cool. I know some bands do that.
Because
Yeah, maybe.
there's certain certain songs that the way they were written on guitar and the way I wrote them on acoustic, I like to play
Well,
some-
most songs worth their salt. If they're good, it sounds good on acoustic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a few songs that you're like, yeah, maybe it doesn't translate, but a good song is meant to sound good on acoustic, and then it can go anywhere.
I agree.
So that's a good sign of how it translates then for you. You know, that's very cool. This has been very entertaining. I want to thank you. I want people to go check out this album and let you know. This has been fun.
Okay, man.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Sure. Bye. Bye.